He's dead. What do you think? Now, all this wealth is mine, and you have no one left.
Son soul, you touched my pain, you will pay with everything you have.
You didn't get the house. You just lost everything. Welcome to the hell I created for you.
Fog lay over the Sonoma vineyards like a gauze curtain, soft yet suffocating, turning each vine into a blurred silhouette that breathed in and out with the wind. The chapel's cello had long since fallen silent. Its last note still seemed to hum somewhere between the cypress trees and the damp earth. Outside, a photographer's flash fractured the mist with quick, nervous bursts, and then even that ceased. Only the rhythmic drip of rain from the chapel's eaves remained a slow metronome to grief. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, wax, and lilies, the perfume of morning. Eleanor Linden stood beside the closed casket, her hand resting on the silver edge, her back perfectly straight. She was small, almost fragile in frame, but there was nothing fragile about the way she occupied the space. People moved around her in polite murmurs, a choreography of condolences and avoidance, each afraid that if they looked too closely, her silence might expose their own discomfort. Her son, Nathan, lay in that casket. They had said he died instantly, no pain. The paramedics had assured her, as though pain could be measured by seconds or soothed by platitudes. The car had exploded at the foot of Route 12, flames visible even from the vineyard ridge. His body, the coroner said, was beyond open display. Eleanor did not believe in no pain. Not in life. Not in death. The priest's voice trembled through the chapel Latin phrases wrapped around verses about mercy, rest, and deliverance. Eleanor bowed her head when expected, but her mind moved elsewhere. To the letters she'd found in Nathan's office, the half-finished plans for Holloway House, his dream project, and the one thing left unclaimed by tragedy. Even as others prayed, she was taking inventory not of the loss, but of what remained to protect. Across the aisle, Sienna Clark Linden sat in calculated grief, the widow, 28, beautiful, composed, her black dress cut close to the body, her lips the color of bruised wine. Each tear fell precisely on cue, each gesture measured as if the room were a stage and sorrow an audience she meant to captivate. Her every movement was perfect, and because it was perfect, Eleanor knew it was false. When the ceremony ended, and the procession of mourners dwindled into small clusters of polite chatter under umbrellas, Eleanor caught the faint shimmer of Sienna's ring catching light, the one Nathan had chosen himself. It gleamed like irony. Laura Chen, Eleanor's oldest friend and business partner, leaned close. "She's good," Laura whispered, almost convincing. Eleanor didn't answer. She only adjusted the black glove on her hand and said softly, "Let her perform. Everyone needs a part to survive a funeral." Later, when the last guest left, the house on High Ridge fell quiet again. The rooms remembered Nathan in details that stabbed. A coffee stain on the edge of his desk, his jacket folded over a chair, a mug half forgotten on the piano. She moved through the house as one does through a museum of unfinished sentences. The Holloway House plans still hung framed above his worktable, architectural sketches of small homes with open courtyards, designed for families who could never afford such beauty. It had been his rebellion against the kind of empire she built, Linden & Co., a world of glass towers and hard profit. Nathan had wanted softness. She had called it naivety. Now, looking at his neat, slanted handwriting, she saw only integrity, the kind of purity the world punished. Her phone vibrated. A message from Gavin Holt, attorney at law. "Sienna has reached out. She's asking about Nathan's private estate and his company shares." The words looked harmless, but Eleanor saw the fangs beneath. She read it twice, then once more, as if repetition could dull its sting. She had expected vultures. She hadn't expected one to share her family name. Rain began again, harder this time, streaking down the glass. From the balcony, she saw headlights gliding through the fog, a silver sedan stopping at the gate. A figure emerged, umbrella tilted, phone pressed to her ear. Eleanor didn't need to guess the voice. Even through glass and storm, she recognized the tone of entitlement. "Don't worry, Gavin," Sienna was saying. "She's weak now. She's got no one." Weak. The word landed in Eleanor's chest with a peculiar precision. It was not merely an insult. It was a diagnosis, an assumption, and a challenge. Weak was what people called her after she lost her husband. Weak was what they thought when she refused to remarry. Weak was what Nathan had never dared to say aloud, though she saw it in his pitying eyes whenever she buried herself in work. Eleanor turned from the window and lit a single candle on Nathan's small altar. The flame steadied, catching on the ridges of her face, deepening the shadows that time had drawn. "Weak," she whispered, and her lips curved not in sadness, but in something colder. She had built an empire brick by brick, in a world that mistook her gender for permission to dismiss her. Every deal, every partnership, every concession had cost her a piece of tenderness. What remained was precision, a mind that calculated both affection and retribution with equal fluency. She sat down at her desk, took out a notepad, and began to list what she still controlled: the legal assets. The silver USB in her drawer contained every contract, stock certificate, and deed still under her name. Nathan had asked her to hold them for safekeeping. She had taken that literally. The company, 𝐸𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 Co., was legally hers. Nathan's shares had not yet been transferred. The allies. Decades of favors owed. Bankers, developers, lawyers, a journalist or two who owed their careers to her silence. The enemies. Sienna, Gavin, and anyone greedy enough to think grief made her malleable. Each item on the list calmed her heartbeat. Strategy was her chosen language. It was how she survived loss before, and it would serve again. She began the calls. First to Robert Hale, the executor who had managed Linden affairs since before Nathan was born. Second to the private banker in San Francisco, with orders to temporarily freeze all accounts requiring dual authorization. Third, the hardest, to Tomas Hale, Nathan's oldest friend and former project manager. He had withdrawn after the funeral, too angry to speak. "If they make a move," Eleanor said into the receiver, "we stop them." Not with anger, with paperwork. Tomas hesitated. "You think Sienna will fight?" "She already has," Eleanor replied. The first strike is always spoken in the language of entitlement. As she hung up, the candle burned low. Wax pooled at its base, like time running out. Her mind turned to Gavin Holt, the lawyer, with a polished diction and the predator's smile. She remembered him at the funeral, murmuring something about Nathan's legacy, already gauging how far her grief might stretch. People like him never risked blood when ink would suffice. He would push Sienna forward as the face of innocence, keep his own hands clean. Eleanor could almost hear his pitch. "Let's negotiate. Let's be civil. Let's ensure what's rightfully yours." Civility was the mask of ambition. By midnight, the first threads of her counterstrike were in motion: legal notices prepared, trustees alerted, journalists quietly briefed that Mrs. Linden intends to continue her son's philanthropic projects. It was not just defense. It was narrative control. If Sienna wanted to play the grieving widow to the press, Eleanor would become the guardian of vision. A mother avenging a dream was always more palatable than a mother protecting her fortune. She imagined tomorrow's headlines and almost smiled. Holloway House revival. Linden matriarch steps forward to honor late son. Sienna could hardly contest it without revealing her motives. The phone buzzed again, a message from Laura Chen. "You're already working, aren't you?" "Always," Eleanor typed back. "Grief waits. Lawyers don't." When at last she stood, her reflection in the window startled her. The candle had burned out. The only light came from the storm outside. Her face, pale and sharp, looked like the ghost of her younger self, the woman who had first negotiated a land deal in a room full of men twice her age. She remembered what that woman had told herself then. If they see kindness, They will mistake it for permission. She whispered it again now. Outside, the fog began to thin. Headlights from the departing sedan vanished into the dark road. 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 was quiet once more, though its silence felt less like absence and more like preparation. Eleanor replaced the USB in its velvet pouch and closed the drawer with deliberate care. She poured herself a glass of wine, the last bottle Nathan had bought, and stood by the balcony doors, watching the storm fade to drizzle. The vineyards below were drenched, rows of vines shining black and wet, waiting to be pruned for spring. They looked like lines of soldiers, gathering breath. She raised the glass, not in toast but in promise. "If they think I'm weak," she murmured, "they'll learn what strength costs." And as the first faint light of dawn seeped through the fog, Eleanor 𝐸𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲, matriarch, and now strategist reborn, turned from the window and began again, the soft click of her heels marking the start of a different kind of morning, the kind conducted with precision, patience, and a ledger sharp enough to cut. Morning in Sonoma arrived wrapped in mist and the scent of bitter coffee. The sun climbed reluctantly, its first pale light refracted through the tall glass walls of Holt and Reeves, the most expensive law firm in the valley, a place where grief was weighed, priced, and notarized. On one wall, bottles of vintage wine gleamed in a glass cabinet, trophies of indulgence displayed above a row of meticulously arranged legal tomes. Their labels caught the light, throwing red and gold reflections across the marble floor, like blood seen through water. Eleanor 𝐸𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 walked into that room, the way generals walk into negotiation tables after a lost battle, calm, deliberate, unbroken. Her hair was pinned with precision, her coat buttoned to the throat. Her face was so composed that it frightened those who mistook stillness for surrender. Every step carried the weight of years of boardrooms conquered, men outmaneuvered, and empires built in a world that had never wanted to see her succeed. Across from her sat Sienna Clark Linden, draped in beige and self-assurance. Her dress hugged her like armor. The silk scarf at her neck seemed designed to soften the blade beneath her words. Golden hair fell in casual waves. She looked immaculate, unshaken, the portrait of elegance painted for sympathy. "Thank you for coming, Eleanor," said Gavin Holt, his voice as smooth as polished glass. He smiled, a professional smile, practiced in the art of extraction. "We just want to clarify a few points in Nathan's will." Eleanor lowered herself into the chair. Her movements were slow, deliberate, a woman who knew the value of silence. "Go ahead." Sienna placed her manicured hand on a folder of papers, the motion graceful but territorial. "Nathan always said everything was ours," she began, voice pitched to sound tender. "The 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 estate, his shares in 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝐴, our joint investments. I only want what was promised, formally acknowledged." Her tone was honey, but her eyes were frost. Eleanor met the stare head-on. "My son left no property under his personal name," she said, each syllable clipped and exact. "All holdings are tied to 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝐴, and 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝐴 is mine." The room fell still. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Sienna's lips curved. "Of course. I'm not asking for conflict, only clarity. We're both grieving." The words were phrased like compassion, but something beneath them vibrated with threat. Gavin interjected with a lawyer's careful diplomacy. "Mrs. 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝐴, I think both of you want to honor Nathan's memory. Perhaps a symbolic division of the assets? A gesture of goodwill." Eleanor set down her cup. The porcelain hit the saucer with a sound that sliced the air. "Symbolic?" she said quietly. "You mean the legacy of the living, not the dead." The smile on Gavin's lips faltered. Sienna tilted her head, unruffled. "There's no need for anger. I'm just protecting my future." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Your future is built on my son's grave?" The silence that followed was so complete that even the wall clock hesitated. Eleanor rose, collecting the stack of files in front of her. "This meeting is over. I think we understand each other well enough. At the door, she turned back to Sienna, the kind of gaze that could have carved stone. "Don't mistake pity for weakness," she said softly. "I built this empire with my bare hands. You don't know who you're dealing with." Then she left. Behind her, the faint trace of Sienna's perfume lingered, jasmine and ambition. It was a sweet scent, the kind that made people forget it could choke you. That evening, the 𝐅𝐴𝐸 estate sat beneath a shroud of wind and silence. The rain from earlier had stopped, but the air carried the charge of a storm that hadn't yet left. The grand hallways were dim, the kind of dim that made old portraits seem to breathe. Eleanor sat in the reading room, a fire crackling low in the hearth. On the table beside her, a glass of Cabernet caught the lamplight, a red mirror. She tapped the iPad beside her. The security feed flickered to life. On the screen, Sienna appeared in the drawing room, swathed in a silk robe the color of cream. She laughed into her phone, voice syrupy, her smile framed perfectly for any audience who might have been watching. Then came the words. "She's an old woman with no one. Just be patient. Lonely people fall easily. Gavin says the law is on my side. When I get the house, I'll sell it. Then I'll disappear." A sharp crack echoed through the room, the sound of crystals splitting in her hand. Red wine and blood spilled together across the white rug, a dark bloom spreading like a wound. Eleanor didn't flinch. She watched the feed, her face unmoving, her pulse steady. Inside, a slow fire built. Not the kind that destroyed, the kind that smelted. On the mantel, a photograph of Nathan smiled down, his eyes alight with plans, his hands smudged with dust from some construction site. Eleanor reached up and touched the frame. "My son," she whispered, voice low, steady, dangerous. "She thinks I am shadow. But the darkness is where I learned to see." Outside, thunder rolled. Wind lashed against the windows like an argument that refused to end. Through the speakers, Sienna's laugh echoed again, brittle, shrill, unearned. Eleanor rose. She walked to her study, the long hem of her dress brushing the wooden floor like the whisper of a verdict. From the safe she drew a heavy folder. Old stock certificates, contracts, proxy agreements, papers that had survived 3 recessions and a lifetime of betrayal. She laid them out under the lamplight. The glow painted her face in gold and shadow, softening nothing. "They want a war," she murmured. "Then I'll give them one without guns, without noise. A war fought on paper and in silence." She opened her laptop. The hum of its fan filled the room like a breath before an oath. Her first email was to her personal counsel, 3 words in the subject line: "Initiate audit protocol." The message beneath was longer, colder. "Freeze all accounts associated with Nathan's estate. Place a temporary hold on all inheritance filings. No disbursements authorized without my direct consent." Then came the next to Laura Chen, CEO of 𝐸𝐤𝐸 & Co. "Alert the board. Full internal review effective immediately. No external communication until I approve. I expect loyalty, not sympathy." She sent another, shorter still, to her media contact in San Francisco. If approached about family disputes, the only comment is this: "Mrs. Linden is ensuring the integrity of her son's legacy." Nothing more. By the time she hit send on the final message, it was nearly 1 a.m. She poured another glass of wine. The hand that held it was bandaged, but her grip was firm. On the security screen, Sienna lounged on the sofa, her champagne glass raised in triumph. She looked like a queen rehearsing for her coronation. Eleanor leaned closer, her reflection overlapping the younger woman's face on the monitor, 2 generations of power divided by motive. "You laugh," she whispered, "because you still think this is a game." Outside, lightning illuminated the valley for a heartbeat, the vineyard silvered, the sky torn open. Eleanor straightened. Her silhouette in the window was tall, severe, unmistakable. "They never see the strike coming," she said. "Not until they're already in the crosshairs." She cleaned the cut on her palm, wrapped it in gauze, then lifted her glass once more. The wine trembled under the light. In it, her face looked older, harder, stripped of grief. She drank slowly, each swallow deliberate, ritualistic. By the time she set the glass down, the transformation was complete. She was no longer the mother who had buried her son. She was the woman who would bury anyone who tried to profit from his death. In the quiet that followed, the house seemed to listen. Wind sighed through the cracks, the fire whispered its small applause, and somewhere deep inside the walls, the foundations remembered the hands that had built them. Eleanor stood at the window, looking out into the storm that was both literal and her own. The valley below was dark. The vines bent under the weight of rain. Somewhere out there, the future hers, Sienna's, Nathan's waited to be decided. She pressed her uninjured hand to the cold glass and said softly, "Grief makes fools of the weak. But I have never been weak." Outside, the thunder answered. And as lightning carved her reflection into two grief and resolve, Eleanor Linden smiled, faint and final. War had been declared. When betrayed by the friend you trusted most, how will you respond? Comment 1 if you choose forgiveness to keep the peace. Comment 2 if you choose distance and self-protection. Late afternoon settled over Sonoma Valley like silk poured through gold, the last light gliding across the vineyards, catching on the cliffs and the restless sea beyond. From above, 𝐅𝐸𝐿𝐥𝐲 estate looked almost mythic, gray stone walls standing against the wind, its windows glinting like the eyes of something ancient and alive. Inside, the house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that remembers voices. Eleanor Linden stood before the wide glass window, a half-full glass of wine in her hand, her reflection ghosted in the twilight. The waves below crashed against the rocks with an indifferent rhythm. Her son's laughter had once filled these halls, now only silence answered her. Behind her, Laura Chen's voice broke the hush. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her tone carrying both concern and disbelief. Inviting her here into 𝐅𝐸𝐿𝐥𝐲 itself? Eleanor didn't turn. "I'm sure," she said simply. "This house is too big for one lonely woman." She set down her glass, her eyes reflecting the firelight like polished steel. "She believes she can take Nathan's legacy from me. I want to see how much she gives away once she's within these walls." Laura frowned. "You're playing with fire. Sienna's not just ambitious, she's cunning. If she suspects you, she'll strike." A faint smile curved Eleanor's lips. "People only strike when they know they're at war." She finally turned, eyes sharp as cut crystal. "And she still believes she's a guest." The next morning, the iron gates of 𝐅𝐸𝐿𝐥𝐲 groaned open. A silver Mercedes slid up the gravel drive, its tires whispering over the stones. When Sienna Clark Linden stepped out, she looked like she'd stepped out of an advertisement: white silk dress, dark glasses, perfume trailing faintly through the cold air. She tilted her head toward the mansion with an expression that was almost reverent, though not with affection. It was the look of a buyer appraising property. "Eleanor," she called brightly, the sound bouncing off the old stone walls. "My God, this house. It's magnificent. Nathan used to tell me stories about it, but I never imagined." Eleanor descended the steps, her movements composed, voice serene. 𝐅𝐸𝐿𝐥𝐲 has always opened its doors to family," she said. "Think of this as an opportunity for us to understand each other better." Sienna took her hand, the gesture light and practiced. "You're very kind. I don't know how to thank you." "There's no need," Eleanor replied softly. "We're both learning to live after loss." They walked through the grand hallway together. The floorboards murmured beneath their feet. On the walls hung Nathan's sketches, blueprints of community housing, the work that had consumed his heart. Sienna's eyes flicked over them without much interest until she stopped at a photograph. Nathan and Eleanor at the opening of their first project, smiling, sleeves rolled up, hope blazing in their faces. "He looks so happy," Sienna murmured. "I hope I can preserve that legacy." Eleanor regarded her quietly, the corner of her mouth lifting into something that looked like a smile, but wasn't. "Yes," she said, voice almost tender. "Keeping what you never built, that's the hardest art of all." Sienna laughed softly, mistaking the remark for humor. Eleanor didn't correct her. "Your room's at the end of the hall," she said instead. "It faces the sea. You'll like it." When Sienna's door closed behind her, Eleanor took out her phone and pressed a single button, a muted beep. The house's security system came alive, 20 hidden cameras, 4 directional microphones, all streaming to the control room in the basement. On the monitors, Sienna appeared in different angles, admiring the decor, touching the polished furniture, running her fingers over a jewelry case before smiling faintly to herself. Laura entered with cause, 2 cups of coffee, and set one down beside Eleanor. "I can't believe you actually did this," she said. Eleanor's gaze stayed fixed on the screen. "I'm only observing," she murmured, waiting for her to show her truth. "If anyone finds out, they'll understand," Eleanor interrupted. "I'm a mother protecting my dead son's legacy. No one will dare call that a crime." The monitor's blue light flickered across Eleanor's face, sharpening her features into something half beautiful, half merciless. That night, wind from the Pacific tore at the windows, the house groaning like a ship in a storm. Sienna sat alone in the drawing room, a bottle of champagne beside her. She called someone. In the basement, Eleanor watched through the feed, headphones on. Sienna's voice came through low, lilting, every word deliberate. "Yes, I'm here now." "No, she suspects nothing. This place is heaven. If Nathan were still alive, he'd never have left it. But now, it'll be mine." Eleanor inhaled slowly, setting down her glass. Her hand tightened over the keyboard, knuckles pale. With one small movement, she switched to another camera, the chandelier view. The lens caught Sienna's face perfectly. Beautiful, confident, hollow. Beside her, Laura's whisper trembled. "What are you seeing?" Eleanor didn't blink. "The truth," she said quietly. "It's always most beautiful when people think no one's watching." When the call ended, Sienna poured another glass, humming faintly to herself. Eleanor removed the headphones, her face unreadable, and rose. She walked through the long corridor of 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲, the floor creaking beneath her steps. Wind whistled through the cracks in the windows, whispering like her son's voice through the walls. She paused at Nathan's room. It was just as he had left it, blueprints on the desk, photographs pinned to the corkboard, the jacket he'd worn on his last day hanging loosely over a chair. She touched it gently, then pressed her hand to the desk. "My son," she whispered, her voice breaking the air. "I'll keep my promise. No one will turn this place into a marketplace for greed." Outside, lightning cleaved the sky, throwing her reflection against the glass solitary, proud, unyielding. At the far end of the corridor, camera 21 blinked red. It caught her silhouette in the light of the storm, but this time, Eleanor wasn't the only one watching. In her bedroom, Sienna stood by the door, her phone raised, taking photos of the hallway. A spark of curiosity or perhaps suspicion flickered in her eyes. 2 women, 1 house. Each convinced she held control. But only one of them understood what 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 had become. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a stage, a fortress turned trap. And before long the cage would close. Monday morning in Sonoma Valley was unnaturally clear, the sky glassy and perfect, as if trying too hard to look honest. Dew still clung to the windshield as Sienna Clark Linden stepped into the headquarters of Linden & Co. Developments, a 7-story glass tower rising from the valley, a monument to the empire Eleanor Linden had built with her own hands and blood. The silver nameplate outside mirrored Sienna's reflection, tall, sleek, confident smile. Her heels struck the marble floor with a precise rhythm, the sound of someone who believed she was walking toward a throne. Today, Sienna was certain her life was about to change. The night before, Eleanor had called, her tone soft, almost benevolent. I want you to work at the company. Nathan always said you had a talent for communication. I think a position in PR would suit you. Her voice had been calm and low, but Sienna had only heard director of PR. She had already imagined herself in a corner office, signing contracts, giving magazine interviews, smiling under the caption, "The widow who carries the Linden legacy." Reality arrived differently. Her office was half the size of a high-ridge bathroom. No windows. One wooden desk, a dated computer. On the door, a small metal plate read, "Sienna Clark, Administrative Assistant." Her lips twitched. There must be some mistake, Laura? Laura Chen, the CEO, stood straight and expressionless. No mistake. This is a direct appointment from Mrs. Linden. You'll be assisting the project management office. But I thought Linden & Co. doesn't operate on assumptions, Miss Clark. Sienna froze, her smile cracking. Through the glass wall, she saw Eleanor crossing the lobby, gray coat, silver hair tied neatly, her gaze cutting through the space like a scalpel. Eleanor paused just long enough to meet her eyes and nod. A perfectly polite, perfectly chilling nod. Welcome to the bottom floor. The next morning, Sienna nearly threw her phone when the alarm rang. The high-ridge housekeeper had already called 3 times. "Mrs. Linden wants the car to pick you up at 6:30. HR meeting starts at 7:15. Sienna had never woken that early except for sunrise photo shoots in the Maldives. She stumbled into the office with smudged mascara, wrinkled dress, and a $9 latte clutched like a weapon. "You're 14 minutes late," Laura said without looking up from her screen. "Next time, report your delay." Sienna forced a smile. "Maybe the GPS, we don't blame technology here, we fix ourselves." Sienna stood frozen, pulse thudding in her ears. For the first time in her life, she had no idea what to do. The rest of the day unraveled like an expensive farce. Sienna, hair disheveled, hands trembling, battled Excel sheets, confused purchase orders with project codes. She sent the wrong email, printed the wrong documents, and spilled coffee over the project director's files. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor, Eleanor presided over the board meeting. On the massive screen, her face appeared, calm voice, every word metallic with precision. 7% growth post-crisis is not luck, it's discipline. Linden & Co. doesn't just build homes. We build trust, the one thing money can't buy. Silence followed. The light caught her face, cold, commanding, utterly in control. From below, Sienna looked up through the glass atrium and saw that reflection framed by steel. It hit her then. This woman wasn't just her late husband's mother. She was a queen, and this building was her kingdom. That evening, Eleanor invited Sienna to dinner at High-Ridge. Candlelight shimmered. Red wine glowed dark as garnet. The air was so polite it felt staged. Eleanor poured Sienna a glass and asked, gently, "How was your first day?" Sienna forced a smile. "Different, I'm still adjusting." "Habits form when people have purpose," Eleanor said, her tone almost tender. "Nathan once told me, if I don't rise before my workers, I'll never lead them." He did at 5 a.m. He was already on site. Eleanor set her glass down, eyes cutting through the candle flame. "If you want to understand Nathan, start where he learned to work." The air thickened. Sienna placed her fork down, feeling less like a dinner guest than a defendant. She softened her voice. "I really am trying." "Good," Eleanor said. "But don't try for someone else's position. Try for your own. People only deserve what they understand." Eleanor stood, ending the meal with a sentence that sounded like a verdict. "Tomorrow, I expect you on time. 7 a.m., 3rd floor. We're visiting a new project." Night. Sienna's heels clicked down the wooden hallway like a ticking clock. On her desk, a tablet lit up with a new email from Laura Chen. From laura.chen@lindenco.com. Subject: Weekly schedule body. Mrs. Linden requests your presence at the Holloway House site inspection. Departure 6:15 a.m. Wear safety boots. No makeup necessary. Sienna stared at the last line. No makeup necessary. That was Eleanor's way of saying, stop performing. In the room next door, Eleanor sat alone, reviewing company reports. The desk lamp cast a golden glow across her face. On her computer screen, the internal camera feed played silently. Sienna's reflection, proud yet clumsy, still unaware of the real game she'd entered. Eleanor murmured to herself, voice low and edged with steel, marble or iron, only those who can take the hit will ever stand. She sipped her wine and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, her heartbeat was steady. She was no longer the grieving mother before a grave. She was the queen of 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲, and the young widow across the hall, she was simply another piece, newly placed on a board made of marble and steel. When they place you at the bottom to teach you a lesson, how would you respond? Comment 3 if you believe silence and success are the sweetest revenge. Comment 4 if you believe sometimes you must strike hard to remind them who you are. The Meridian, the most elegant restaurant in Sonoma Valley, set among ancient olive groves where billionaires and politicians came to dine in silence. White curtains swayed in the wind. Wine poured into crystal glasses with a sound so delicate it was almost expensive to hear. Eleanor Linden arrived 10 minutes early. She chose the corner table, a perfect vantage point for someone who had spent her life commanding rooms. The pearls around her neck gleamed faintly, contrasting with the dim light. She no longer wore morning black, but a pale ash gray, the color of someone who had learned to vanish from emotion, leaving behind only intellect and control. A waiter bowed. "Mrs. Linden, Miss Clark Linden just called. She'll be here shortly." Eleanor nodded. "Leave the 2018 𝐏𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 on the table. She likes red sweet, easy to swallow." At exactly 12:05, Sienna arrived. Chanel No. 5 trailed behind her like smoke. She wore an elegant cream dress, black sunglasses perched lightly atop her golden hair. To any observer, it looked like a peaceful lunch between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, polite, civil, a meal for reconciliation, but no one saw the fire burning behind their eyes. "Eleanor," Sienna smiled. "Sienna," Eleanor replied evenly. "Sit down." Their glasses touched the dry ring of crystal colliding, a warning before the duel. Sienna began with flawless small talk. "Work at Linden & Co. has been wonderful. I'm learning so much." "I know," said Eleanor, pouring more wine. "But I also realized I can't live like this forever. Nathan wanted me to have a future of my own." Eleanor looked up. "I'm listening." Sienna's voice softened, smooth as silk. "I don't want to make things hard for you. Maybe we can end this quietly. $2 million, and I'll leave 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲, the company, and the Linden name. Forever." The words fell like a blade striking the table. A waiter passed. Nearby, the scent of rosemary and butter floated in the air, and then silence sealed the room. Eleanor set down her glass. Her hand didn't tremble. "And if I refuse?" Sienna shrugged, smile still gentle. "Then the press will know you've been keeping your son's fortune, hiding the inheritance from his legal widow. I have friends in media, a few articles, a few photos, a story about a controlling mother who couldn't let go." She tilted her head, voice sweet enough to sting. "You know how the public loves a tragedy, especially one with money." Eleanor leaned back, laughing softly. "People fear the truth only when they have something to hide. I don't." The pearls at her neck caught the light, shining like bullets already loaded. Sienna hesitated. "You think you can threaten me?" "No," Eleanor said calmly. "I'm reminding you that I have nothing left to lose, but you do." The air thickened. Guests at the neighboring tables could sense the tension, glancing up, then away, as if witnessing two knives crossing soundlessly in midair. Sienna leaned forward, smiling faintly. "Honestly, I admire you. 60 years old and still running an empire, remarkable. But times have changed. A wealthy, reclusive woman living alone in a stone mansion? It's more tragic than powerful. She sipped her wine, her tone low but cutting. The media will love my story more than yours. Eleanor slowly refilled her glass. Careful, Sienna. Sweet wine makes people forget they're drunk. So you won't pay me? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. I don't buy silence. I let people bury themselves with their words. Midday sunlight spilled through the curtains, falling across the table, two women's faces lit, as if by opposing eras. One young, ambitious, thriving on beauty and risk. The other older, quieter, forged from experience and pain turned into steel. Sienna rested her chin on her hand, voice low. You know, Eleanor, the world loves the young. The press, investors, the public, they want my version. If I say you manipulated Nathan, denied him financial freedom, forced him to sign away his assets, they'll believe me. Your reputation will crumble. All I have to do is wait. Eleanor smiled, her expression serene, as if listening to an old song. You're clever, but there's a problem. What problem? I used to be you. Young, bold, certain that intelligence was enough to win every game. But intelligence doesn't save those who lack ethics. Her voice didn't rise, yet each word struck with the weight of stone against glass. Sienna slowly set her glass down, fingers whitening around the stem. The waiter arrived with dessert, chocolate mousse covered in gold leaf. Sienna smirked. Gold leaf, perfect for you. Everything polished to hide the rot underneath. Eleanor picked up her spoon, slicing a neat piece, eyes never leaving her opponent. And you think exposure frightens me? I've already lost my husband and my son. No gossip is crueler than fate. You can throw anything at me, you won't make me flinch. Her tone dropped, cold as a blade. And you, Sienna, have never lost anything. That's why you don't know fear. But you will. Sienna's smile trembled. Is that a threat? No. Eleanor rose, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. A prediction. She placed the bill on the table without another glance. Sunlight from the window glinted across her pearls, a final punctuation mark at the end of a chapter. Eleanor walked between the silent tables, her footsteps soundless, leaving only the faint trace of her perfume, the cool scent that follows a storm. Behind her, Sienna sat frozen, her smile stiff, her wineglass trembling. She didn't know that at that very moment, Eleanor had already texted Laura Chen. Begin phase 2. Full internal audit. Record all outbound calls. From 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲. Outside the window, wind tore through the olive leaves. The sky was sharp and flawless polished steel. On the table, Sienna's wineglass tilted, and a drop of red slid down its curve, leaving a streak that looked like blood. The war between marble and steel had officially begun, and from this point on, no smile would ever be real again. The first storm of the season lashed across Sonoma Valley, rain striking the glass walls of 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲 estate as if trying to wash away the growing sin within. In the reading room, Eleanor Linden sat before the fireplace, fingers interlaced. The flames danced against her face, casting flickering light into the silver depths of her eyes, eyes that had lost everything, and yet gleamed now with dangerous purpose. From the staircase came the slow, deliberate rhythm of heels. Sienna Clark Linden appeared in a champagne silk dress, her hair pinned high, lips blood red. She didn't know this would be the night her life changed. You wanted to see me? Eleanor gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. Her voice was calm, not cold, but hollow, as though every emotion in her had fossilized long ago. Sienna crossed her legs, feigning ease. What's this about? If it's the company again. No, Eleanor interrupted. Tonight, we talk about truth. She pressed a button on the remote. From the ceiling, a screen descended. Blue light washed across the room, and in the silence, Sienna's own voice filled the air, clear, undeniable. Gavin, she's weakening. I'll win her trust. Once I have her signature, I'll sell the assets. 2 million is nothing compared to what she controls. Don't worry, the law will side with me. A man's voice followed, quieter but distinct. Do it. By the time she reacts, we'll already have the media on our side. Eleanor said nothing. She only looked at Sienna. Sienna froze, her skin paling. What? What is this? A recording, Eleanor replied. From 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲's security system. You forgot this house is monitored 24 hours a day. The younger woman shot to her feet, voice cracking. You can't record me like that. It's illegal. Perhaps, Eleanor said evenly. But the law doesn't always protect the truth, only those with a louder voice. She rose and walked slowly to the long oak table. On it lay a worn black leather journal, corners frayed, edges aged by time. Eleanor placed her hand upon it as if lifting a relic. Nathan's diary. The air tightened. The fire popped, scattering sparks into the air. Eleanor opened to a marked page. Her voice trembled slightly, yet each word cut through the air like a blade. March 4. Sienna isn't the woman I once loved. She cares more about contracts than dreams. I'm afraid one day she'll love the Linden name more than she ever loved me. Eleanor turned another page, eyes tracing the familiar handwriting. May 21. I've postponed adding her name to the assets. Not from doubt, from instinct. Someone who doesn't understand the value of work can never understand the value of love. Her voice broke on the last line. Then silence. Only the sound of rain against glass. Sienna collapsed back into the chair, head in her hands. No, no. He loved me. He told me he trusted me. Eleanor's gaze softened, a flicker of mercy in the steel. Perhaps he did, but trust, Sienna, has an expiration date. You made sure his ran out. Tears streaked Sienna's face, her mascara bleeding into black rivers. Eleanor, please. I just wanted a piece of something. I have nothing, no one. I'm scared. The word scared stirred something deep inside Eleanor, a memory of the nights she'd trembled alone after Nathan's death. But the softness in her eyes hardened again. Scared? I was scared too of losing my son. You're scared of losing money, of poverty, of being forced to live honestly. Sienna crawled closer, clutching at Eleanor's hand. Please forgive me. I'll leave. I'll stay silent. Eleanor withdrew her hand and stood slowly. There's no need to leave. Just listen to this last thing. She went to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out a silver USB, the same kind Nathan had once used. She plugged it into the projector. On screen, Nathan appeared sitting in his office, tired but composed, speaking directly to the camera. If anything happens to me, remember this, Mom. Don't let your life's work become a commodity. Sienna needs to learn that money can never replace character. The light from the screen reflected on Eleanor's face. The first tear fell. Her voice trembled, but pride still underpinned every word. Justice doesn't always need a court. Sometimes, it only needs truth. She removed the USB, shutting off the screen. The room returned to the warm, flickering glow of the fire. Sienna wept into her hands. Eleanor, please. Don't destroy me. I didn't know what I was doing. No, Eleanor said softly. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every step, and that's why I don't need to ruin you. You've already done it yourself. The younger woman sank to her knees, voice breaking. I'm sorry. Eleanor looked down at her, silver eyes glinting in the firelight. Sorry won't change the past, she said, but it might save what's left of your future. You have a choice: walk away and start again, or keep reaching for something you'll never understand. One of those paths will kill you. Eleanor turned and walked into the hall. Rain still poured outside. Behind her, Sienna's sobs blended with the crackling of the fire, growing faint, fading away. At the window, Eleanor paused, staring toward the sea. Lightning split the clouds, illuminating her reflection, no longer the grieving mother, but the keeper of justice in the House of Linden. Around her neck, the pearls shimmered in the flash, no longer ornaments, but medals of victory, a victory that required no money, no blood, only truth. When truth is powerful enough to be in your hands, what will you do with it? Comment 5 if you believe in letting truth itself strip everything bare. Comment 6 if you believe truth must be made public and justice enforced through action. 3 days after the night of reckoning, 𝐅𝐸𝐿𝐥𝐲 estate was silent. No music, no half-finished wine glasses, no echo of heels on wood floors. Only the scent of ashes and the damp trace of confessions not yet dry. Eleanor Linden sat by the window, staring at the gray-blue waves colliding against the cliff below. On the table lay Nathan's journal, open to the final page. Her fingertips brushed over the words her son had written. If I'm no longer here, use your pain to build something new. Don't seek revenge, teach them through work. She read it again and again, every word cutting and healing in equal measure. From the hall came the soft, uneven sound of footsteps. Sienna Clark Linden appeared, hair tangled, eyes swollen, voice trembling. You wanted to see me? Eleanor nodded, without looking up. Sit down. Sienna obeyed, eyes downcast. I'll leave, she whispered. I promise. Just give me time to pack. No need, Eleanor interrupted. I'm offering you a chance. Sienna looked up, confused. A chance? Eleanor rose and retrieved an envelope from the desk. She set it on the table, her voice calm but heavy, each word binding like a contract. Work on Nathan's Holloway House project. 1 year. $40,000. If you finish it, you'll have experience, money, and a new life. If you quit, you'll finally understand why you were never worthy of the Linden legacy. Sienna let out a brittle laugh. You mean actual work? At a construction site? Yes, said Eleanor. Nathan built Holloway House for working people, not for names to be printed in charity reports. I've never worked? Eleanor's gaze sliced through her. You're right. This is your first chance to learn what sweat is worth. A week later, the Holloway House project, a stretch of land south of town, welcomed its new intern. The workers murmured when they saw Sienna arrive. Brand new safety vest, leather designer boots instead of steel toe, sunscreen applied like she was heading to the beach. The site supervisor, Frank Morrison, frowned. Miss Linden, those are fashion boots, not safety boots. Sienna smirked. They have rubber soles. Yeah, and lipstick doubles as sunblock? He muttered, turning away. Work began. The temperature hit 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Dust clung to every surface. Men with tanned arms and women with tied-up hair worked tirelessly, while Sienna was winded within an hour. Her phone buzzed constantly. Instagram reminders. You haven't posted in 6 days, your followers might forget you. She looked around. No cameras, no praise, no admiration. Only the hammering of nails, the churn of cement, the sting of sweat running down her neck. That evening, she returned to 𝐅𝐸𝐿𝐥𝐲, covered in dust. Eleanor waited in the dining room. How was your first day? Horrible. You can't expect me to work like a laborer. I don't know anything about construction. How strange, Eleanor said softly. Nathan started by cutting wood and carrying cement. He called it the language of labor. Perhaps you should learn a few words. You're punishing me. No, said Eleanor. I'm giving you the opportunity I wish someone had given Nathan to understand the world through your hands, not your wallet. 2 months passed. Sienna traded dresses for jeans, leather for steel, but still moved like she didn't belong. She spilled reports, miscalculated budgets, forgot workers' names. One morning, she was caught taking sunny construction site photos for Instagram with the caption, "Building dreams, every brick tells a story." Frank looked at her coldly. Maybe try building one instead of writing about it. By week 10, she broke. In the temporary office, she threw her hard hat on the desk and wept. You win, she screamed as Eleanor entered. You've destroyed me. I don't even know who I am anymore. Eleanor didn't raise her voice. No, Sienna, she said quietly, calm enough to be frightening. You've just met the real version of yourself. The young woman shook, shoulders trembling. Eleanor stepped closer and laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. Did you think I wanted to torture you? I wanted you to see what's real. Nathan chose labor to understand people's worth. I'm giving you the lesson he never got to teach. Sienna said nothing, only tears falling onto her cement-dusted hands. I don't know how to start over, she whispered. Start, Eleanor replied, by stopping the act. That night, Sienna packed up her things from the site. She left without a word. The yellow floodlights painted her face tired, unpainted, human for the first time. From afar, Eleanor watched, a glass of wine in hand. Laura Chen stepped up beside her. Are you sure? Letting her walk away without calling the police? Eleanor answered softly. If I handed her to the law, she'd only learn fear. I want her to learn the harder lesson, responsibility. She turned to the unfinished structure, wet concrete, light shimmering over steel beams. Nathan had once said, a house isn't just walls and roofs. It's where people are tested and changed. Eleanor smiled faintly. You were right, Nathan. Sometimes, to build someone, you have to let them collapse first. A week later, a letter arrived, handwritten, brief, without excuses. Thank you for not throwing me out, but for pushing me into the real world. I don't know who I'll become, but at least now I know I no longer want to pretend. Eleanor folded the letter carefully, eyes distant. She didn't smile, but warmth returned to them at last. Somewhere inside 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲, the pearls around her neck caught the light softly, no longer symbols of power, but of forgiveness. 6 months had passed since Sienna Clark Linden left 𝐅𝐚𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲. Winter had melted away, and the morning mist of Sonoma Valley was no longer silver gray, but clear, as if even the sky itself had learned forgiveness. The Holloway House project, Nathan Linden's final dream, was complete. 30 small homes, painted in soft ocean blue, lined the slope facing the sea. The roofs shimmered beneath the sunrise like tears that had finally been wiped dry. Eleanor Linden stood on the second-floor balcony, holding her son's worn blueprints. Everything around her was still, but inside she felt something quietly restored, not power, not vengeance, but meaning. Nathan was gone, yet his spirit lingered in every brick, in the laughter of the families now moving into their homes. A soft knock sounded on the door. Laura Chen appeared, her voice hushed as though she might shatter the calm. Someone's here to see you, Eleanor. No appointment, but I think you'll want to meet her. Eleanor turned and froze. A figure was walking slowly through the gate. A young woman with short hair, sun-darkened skin, calloused hands, a gray work shirt, a hard hat hanging loosely by her side. No silk, no perfume, no makeup. Sienna. They stared at each other for a long moment before Eleanor broke the silence. How are you? Sienna smiled, faintly weary, but genuine. Better than the person you once knew. Eleanor nodded and gestured her inside. They sat in the small office overlooking the sea, the same room where Nathan had drawn his first design sketches. On the desk stood a photograph of him, laughing, hands smudged with paint, eyes glowing with his dream of building affordable homes. Sienna looked at the photo and said quietly, I finally understand why Nathan loved this work. Her voice wavered, a confession needing no forgiveness. When I watched a family carrying their child into their first home, I felt something money could never buy. The feeling of being useful. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She simply watched the woman who had once been a threat now sat before her, calm, humble, and deeper than she had ever been. Where are you working now? A small construction company in Santa Rosa, Sienna said. We build homes for low-income families. I'm a project assistant. No glamour, no spotlight. But every day, I learn something new about people and about myself. Eleanor smiled, a rare, true smile she hadn't felt in years. Now you understand, Money can't hold a soul together. Only work and truth can. Tears rolled down Sienna's cheeks. Thank you, not for forgiving me, but for not giving up on me. Eleanor said softly, you don't need to thank me. Nathan chose to love you. And because of that love, I chose to teach you how to stand. I don't deserve it, Sienna whispered. No one deserves forgiveness, Eleanor replied, her tone gentle. We can only try not to repeat our mistakes. A sea breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of salt. Both women sat in silence, gazing out the window at Holloway House as families began to move in. A little boy ran past, laughing as he chased a red paper kite. He would be proud, Sienna said softly. He always was, Eleanor replied. Of you, of me, of anyone who turns pain into something good. That afternoon, they walked to the construction site together, where the final brick was being laid. The sun began to set, painting the cream-colored walls in gold. Sienna stepped forward to help the worker plant a small plaque at the entrance, the Holloway House Project, in memory of Nathan Linden. For those who build, not for those who buy. Eleanor read the words slowly, her voice quiet but firm. For those who build, not for those who buy. Then she turned to Sienna. That was my son's message. And now, it belongs to both of us. Sienna nodded, eyes glistening. Eleanor handed her a hammer, the symbol of the project. Place the last brick, she said. The rest belongs to you. Sienna took the hammer, hands trembling, and drove the final brick into place. The sound echoed dry and sharp, but in that moment it rang like the closing bell of a long trial. As the sun rose higher, its light bathed the entire hillside in gold. The two women stood side by side, looking out at the glittering sea. No hatred, no fear, only wind and peace. Eleanor spoke softly. My son once asked me, do you believe people can change? Today, I know the answer. She turned to Sienna. Yes, if they truly want to. Sienna smiled through her tears. Thank you for teaching me how to live, not just survive. Eleanor looked toward the horizon. You taught yourself, Sienna. I only kept the door open. The wind lifted Eleanor's silver hair and brushed through Sienna's short locks. On the horizon, the sunrise spilled gold across the ocean, streaming over the new homes, glinting in their windows like thousands of tiny pearls. A flock of birds soared across the brightening sky, leaving white trails behind. Music rose soft, warm, like a farewell blessing. Two women, one who had lost her son and one who had lost herself, stood together, no longer enemies or victims, but souls released. No one won, no one lost, only those who had awakened. Eleanor rested a hand on Sienna's shoulder. My son once said, every sunrise is a reminder that we can still rebuild something. Now go and keep building. Sienna nodded. When someone who once hurt you truly changes, what would you choose? Comment 7 if you would open the door for a second chance. Comment 8 if you would keep your boundaries, because the past is not easily forgotten.